Hello and welcome to my coverage of the World Chess Championship. We are at the halfway mark. We have played 6 games out of the 12 and it's time for game 7, the second half. And Carlsen will start the second half of the match with the white pieces. His second white in a row. He had white in game 6, but for the second half they turn it around, the order of the games, so Carlsen has white. So if you're new here, Magnus Carlsen from Norway is the world champion. He is rated 28.35, 3 points ahead of his challenger from the United States, Fabiano Caruana, rated 28.32. And let's just move on to the game. Carlsen opened with d4. In game 6 he went with e4, and as indicated by his choice of a rare sideline against the Petroff, it seems either that, well, he doesn't have anything special against the Petroff, or he's saving the best for last and he's saving some special preparation for the last few games. I sort of doubt it though. But anyway, in this game he goes for d4. And, well, in game 2 that meant the Queen's Gambit declined, and through transposition, that's what we're going to get here. After c4 e6 we have the Queen's Gambit declined. Taking the pawn is of course the Queen's Gambit accepted, which Fabi has played, but his weapon of choice is the Queen's Gambit declined here. And along with Ruy Lopez, the Spanish game, the Queen's Gambit declined is the most popular opening in World Championship matches, so this is not much of a surprise. Bishop to f4, this is what Carlsen tried in game 2. Bishop to g5 in this position is of course the more common move, but bishop f4 is what Carlsen went with. Castles, e3, and now c5. We mentioned in the game 2 video that Carlsen was on the black side of loss in the Queen's Gambit declined against Anand when he played knight b to d7. But Fabiano goes for the principled move here, which is to play c5. Okay, d takes c5 and bishop takes c5. We are still following game 2. Knight to c6. These are all the most common moves here. a3 and queen a5. Now in game 2, Carlsen played rook to d1. If you want to check out game 2, I will leave a card to game 2 which had this exact opening but with rook to d1. In that game, Caruana had excellent preparation. Clearly he out-prepared Magnus. And so in this game Magnus opted for another try. He went with knight to d2. Now his knight is coming to b3 and we can't allow that. That's a positional threat, hitting the queen and the bishop, which would win the bishop pair. So here the most popular move is to play bishop back to e7. But Caruana had another idea, and it seems like he's playing these main lines, but then he has, you know, some tricky or little used sidelines that he wants to play, like rook d8 in game 2. And here he goes queen d8. And the idea is not to put the bishop on e7, but after knight b3, which was played, to put the bishop on b6. And this is actually a novelty. Previously bishop to e7 had been played here, but the position isn't that common because, well, queen d8 was also a rather rare idea. Here most people agreed that rook d1 was the most principled move, lining up against the queen, and in many lines forcing black to accept a isolated pawn on d5. But Carlsen played bishop e2 here, which doesn't seem to give much, and we can expect an equal game from here, queen to e7. Black's only problem is really the bishop here on c8. If you can solve this problem, black should be very close to equalizing. Now after queen e7, Carlsen opted for pinning the knight, bishop to g5. So now we're actually threatening to take on d5 because we have two guys attacking it and one of the defenders is pinned, so it's actually a threat, which is why Fabi took on c4. And now knight to d2. So Magnus wants to take with a knight on c4. Taking with a bishop doesn't seem to give much. For instance, if you take here, black can even consider playing h6 here, bishop h4, and then knight e5 hitting the bishop on c4, and from there you go to g6, and you manage to unpin, and black shouldn't have any problems. Next up, bishop here to here, and black should be absolutely fine. But knight e2 is played. Now knight e5, adding a defender to the c4 pawn. So if white takes, we're at least going to trade off some pieces, castles, and now black gets on with solving the problem of the c8 bishop, bishop to d7, and this bishop will feel just fine coming to c6 here. Carlsen went with bishop to f4 here, hitting the knight on e5, and after knight g6, of course you don't allow black to take here, so we retreat the bishop, and now finally white is ready to capture on c4 with a knight. Again, black doesn't want white to take on b6 here, eliminating the bishop pair, so black plays bishop to c7. But it has to be admitted that the position is rather dry here. We have symmetrical pawns. You'll notice that this pawn structure completely resembles this one, and then we have two pawns each on the A and the B file. Carlsen played rook after d1, and here we have more trades. The rooks are coming off. Rook after d8, Carlsen took and played rook to d1, and we have more trades. So at the moment it doesn't look like much, very symmetrical, and of course Caruana with black, he tries to initiate some trades, getting closer to equality. Or the draw, he should be already equal, but he's just trying to get the game to a draw. Knight to d5, queen to d4. White wants to take on c3 with a queen, not to ruin his pawn structure. That's exactly what happened, and now Caruana took on g3. So these pawns are doubled, but it's not much of an issue. They're protecting some squares, and you can easily advance these pawns safely, like with f3 and g4. Queen d7 now, bishop to d3, and here Caruana went with b6. We see that both sides are following Capablanca's rule of placing as many pawns as you can on the opposite color of your bishop. So that's what black is doing here. f3, and bishop to b7 was played here, which does allow white to introduce an imbalance into the position, and the decision to allow this was actually criticized by Grishuk and Svidler, and Carlsen now took on g6. So the imbalance we now have is that white has a queen and a knight, while black has a queen and a bishop. And in general in chess we say that a queen and a knight have a slight edge over a queen and a bishop. They tend to work better together. We can see that the queen and the knight can easily control a black square complex in this case, and they can also work on the other complex. So Carlsen plays e4 here, immediately trying to stifle the bishop, placing the pawns on f3 and e4, cuts off this diagonal, so it's harder to activate this bishop. And here Caruana tries to force the issue with queen to c7. Okay, he's hitting the pawn, and one of his ideas is to play bishop to a6 and force a trade of queens. So because in general the queen and the knight tend to work better together, black's main idea here is to actually get a queen trade, which should make the game easier to hold. But from here it's clear that only white can be pressing for a win here. e5 was played. This gives white the d6 square for the knight, which can become useful. Queen c7, c5 check, king went to h2, and now bishop a6. So Caruana manages to get his goal here. This knight is under attack, so we have to move it, and now he gets the queen trade. And white has some chances here. Computer would tend to evaluate this as 0.00, but I think most humans would take white here. You have the knight well posted. You have almost no chances of losing this game, but definitely there are chances for black to go wrong. At the moment the bishop is doing a good job here. It's controlling some key squares that the knight can go to. So for now, Caruana goes for f6, trying to undermine the pawn on e5. Carlsen decides he wants to hold onto it. And usually when you have a knight against a bishop like this, you tend to operate on the complex opposite the bishop. So white has a knight on a black square, the pawn's on black squares. And we're trying to get some black square weaknesses in black's camp. At the moment, because black has some pawns on black squares covering some squares, we don't really have a weakness that the knight can attack. Okay, we do have the d6 square, but we can't really attack any pawns, or there's not another weakness that we can really attack. King f8, the white kings comes over. King f2, king d7. And here I actually thought Carlsen would try something, you know, play on for a while. Maybe play g4, g3, try to get rid of this weakness, the only weakness that can't be attacked by black. And at least try something. But at the end of the day, it turns out that white doesn't really have any good way to penetrate the black position. If black just stays like this, it's really hard to make any progress. And after king e3, we actually had a threefold repetition after bishop to f1, king f2, bishop back to a6, king e3, etc. And then a draw was agreed. So yeah, the 7th draw in a row. Hopefully game 8 will prove decisive. It was in the last World Championship match between Carlsen and Karakin. We had 7 draws there as well, but the 8th game was won by the challenger. But what will happen tomorrow? It seems like a little bit to me like the tide is turning a little bit. I mean, Fabiano has been defending rather easily, not getting into trouble. He was pressing in game 6 with black, and tomorrow he has the white pieces. And what will Carlsen do? Will he still go for the Sicilian? Does he feel like that has been proving to be a good weapon, or should he at this point be worried that Caruana and his team have found some idea to test him in the Rosalimo, or go for the open Sicilian? Only time will tell. We'll see tomorrow. But for now, I am out. Stay tuned for some World Championship tactics. I will show you the solution to the last tactic I left you with, and leave you with a new tactic to try to solve. And I hope you try to solve it, and let me know in the comments how you do. See you in the next video. Bye bye.